Fern spore production and shedding are performed by a diversity of mechanisms. Just one type is enough for this presentation, that of the male ferns. Here are the 5 common male ferns, which all have elongated fronds divided just twice, while others, divided 3 or more times, are much lacier. We will look at spore production in the common male fern, Dryopteris filix mass, which occurs almost everywhere in the UK, but others will feature occasionally. People are often puzzled by the little dots on the reverse of fern fronds. They are the sites of spore production and release, the sori, singular sorus. These are the sori of the common male fern, just before spore release, and here, earlier in the season. Here they are, seen magnified. The sori of male ferns are quite large compared with many others, around 1 millimetre across. Large and small are relative values. Here, briefly, is the ripening process. Unripe, the sori are green. In June they appear to darken as the spore capsules, the sporangia, singular sporangium, themselves darken beneath the transparent lid that covers each sorus, the indusium, which in July lifts to reveal the dark, almost ripe sporangia. The indusium dries, shrivels, and gets itself out of the way of the sporangia, which burst and scatter their spores into the breeze. Here are side views of 2 sori, on the left with its indusium still protecting the sporangia but lifting a little, on the right a sorus with a dried and shrivelled indusium, its sporangia ready to pop and release their spores. The indusium is like a minute umbrella, protection for the sporangia, with its stalk attached to the frond surface. On shrivelling, the indusium of most male ferns rolls up into a form described by comparing it to the mushroom, the chanterelle. In surface view, the centrally attached umbrella stalk shows as a dimple, while each sorus, specifically in the male ferns, has a single radial constriction which has led fern taxonomists, who write the identification guides, to compare these sori to kidneys, describing them as reniform. Do we all agree with that? I think a better description might be little bums, for which the technical term might be gluteiform, named after the gluteus maximus muscles which form human buttocks. Not a very scientific term, but it is memorable. Compare with the completely circular umbrella indusium of the shield ferns, a form known as peltate. We will examine the anatomy of a sorus in detail, first observing it intact and then sectioning it. With the sorus sliced through, we can see its interior. Let's zoom in as close as resolution will allow. All the features are there, but they're not very clear. Let's move on. Here's a diagram to show what we were looking at. So far, for our convenience, we have looked down on the sori, but they're attached to the underside of the frond, so from here on we must invert the diagram and the pictures that follow. Having sectioned the sorus, we can understand how it's put together. On the right, a male fern sorus, and on the left, that of another Dryopteris species, which has bright red indusia, presenting a much clearer picture. Here we compare our hand-cut sections with right, a stained, ultra-thin section for the microscope, and left, the diagram once more, to allow comparison and explanation. Here are 2 male fern sori that have shed their spores. As you might already have noticed, the sporangia have specialised structure that enables them to eject their spores as far as 10 centimetres, well away from the frond into the air currents passing the fern, facilitating dispersal over great distances. Here's a ripe sporangium before it's shed its spores. There is a single row of cells running almost all the way round the capsule, explained by the inset of a spent sporangium viewed from behind. Each cell has thickened inner walls, while the outer is thin, which allows water to evaporate. As water is lost, those cells shrink, or rather they try to shrink, creating tension. The ring of thickened cells, known as the annulus, is incomplete. There is a patch of weak, thin-walled cells where the sporangium will rupture in response to that tension. Here is a sequence of spore dispersal. A shows the intact sporangium. As the annular cells lose water into the dry atmosphere, the annulus contracts and the capsule splits open, B, C and D. When fully stretched, E, suddenly a little bubble appears simultaneously in all the annular cells, F, releasing the tension and catapulting the spores away from the frond to be caught by the breeze. Here's the way that spore ejection mechanism works, shown as animated diagrams. And again. These frond segments were placed on a sheet of paper, secured with a light book and left overnight. In the morning, the segments were lifted aside to reveal their spore prints. We can also lay a frond segment sori up with no covering, allowing the spores to travel as far as the sporangia can throw them, up to 10 centimetres. Remove the segment to show its ghostly outline and the scattering of spores and detached sporangia. Magnified, we can see that the prints are not only of spores, but also of the remains of the sporangia, which tend to fly off their stalks when they snap. If you have access to either a dissecting microscope or a simple digital one, spore dispersal can be experienced in real time. Any inbuilt lighting will be adequate, but to speed the process, illuminate the scene with a warm lamp, not LED of course. Choose your subject carefully. Ferns eject their spores at different times, but mainly in July and August. The indusium must be completely shriveled or becoming so, the sporangia fat and dark brown to black. These features are easily checked with the naked eye or a ×10 hand lens. The time to sample for ripe sori and sporangia varies with latitude and weather. Here in the Scottish Highlands, late June into August is ideal for most male fern species, so in the south everything might get going up to a month earlier. If we miss normal spore production time, there is still a chance of observing shedding later in the year. When ferny verges are mown, new fronds soon appear with new young sori. If the sori mature before winter, they might yet be persuaded to show off their dramatic behaviour. So that I could show you what you'll see when you observe fern spore shedding, and after checking several very enthusiastic reviews, there's a link to one of them below, I bought this digital microscope and dug out an old table lamp with its 60-watt bulb to do the warming. Having first experimented with the L lens shown here, I got far better results working closer with the A lens. Hopefully after a short wait, once the warmth of the lamp has set off the desiccation of the annular cells, the sporangia will become quite lively and the dehiscence mechanism will be fully appreciated. I think you're going to enjoy this. Before long, spores have become scattered all over the microscope, and many of the sporangia have been so agitated that they have become detached and joined the spores. While shooting my videos, I also used my conventional camera to make this little film, which shows minute flashes as the detached sporangia leap several centimetres off the frond and land all over the deck, along with zillions of even smaller spores. Imagine this in the field where the frond would be the other way up, the spores shooting downwards and sideways. Here's what happens, filmed at 2 magnifications. Spore shedding happens so rapidly it's difficult to know where to look, and you find yourself regretting having concentrated on the wrong sporangium, while others pop perfectly just out of sight. With this video you can rewind and look again. Here we can watch the behaviour of the sporangia in real time. Once activated by water loss from those annular cells, they're fast. Sometimes we can see a sporangium empty itself, and sometimes when one snaps it detaches and flies off its stalk. But that's so fast we don't see it happening. The sporangium just vanishes. Next, at full magnification, a single saurus at 5 times normal speed shown 3 times. Now the whole process becomes visible and, I suggest, unforgettable. This phenomenon is just too good not to watch again. Here's another sequence at the maximum magnification this digital microscope can achieve, and 4 minutes in real time, enough for a single saurus to eject most of its spores. Something I've learnt just by making this video. It gets off to a dramatic start, but then there's a bit of a lull before the action really begins. Before, sporangia plump and full of spores, just a few already popped. And after, sporangia open, empty and exhausted, surface covered with spores and spent sporangia. After a complicated life cycle, a spore becomes a new fern. That life cycle and some advice on making use of it to grow your own ferns will require another video. The close-ups shown in this presentation were taken on a very ordinary looking camera, the remarkable Olympus Tough TG6. Not only is it difficult to damage it by dropping and capable of taking photos underwater to down to 50 metres, but it can also be pre-programmed to work right up close to the subject, magnify it and take 5 shots at slightly different focus levels, stitching them all together to make an image of excellent depth. For this specialised photography, one may set up 2 customised programs. I have C2 set for the macro photography used here.